Imagine for a second a city straight out of ancient scriptures, a place of pure legend, a golden kingdom that was said to have just vanished beneath the waves. For thousands of years, pretty much everyone agreed it was just a story. But what if it wasn't? Let's get into this incredible journey from myth to reality. So that brings us to the big question, the one that has hooked historians and believers for centuries. Was the legendary city of Dwarka, Lord Krishna's own kingdom, a real place? Or was it just a powerful myth? For a long, long time, the answer seemed pretty obvious. I mean, just listen to how the ancient texts describe it. A city supposedly built by the divine architect Vishvakarma himself. We're talking about a massive metropolis with, get this, over 900,000 palaces made of gold and silver, a super sophisticated port, a society that was completely self-sufficient. It honestly sounds more like a fantasy kingdom than a real historical city. But this incredible story of divine creation has a really dramatic ending. A series of powerful curses bring the city to its knees, and then, right after Lord Krishna leaves the mortal world, the entire kingdom is swallowed whole by the sea. It just disappears, leaving nothing but stories behind. Okay, so before we jump into the science and the archaeology, you've got to understand the myth. According to the Mahabharata, the end of this golden age was no accident. It was sealed, literally, by a series of powerful curses that pretty much guaranteed its doom. What's so wild is how these curses just pile on top of each other. First, you have Gandhari, a grieving mother from the war, who curses Krishna that his entire clan will destroy itself, just like hers did. Then, Krishna's own son, Samba, brings another curse on the family by disrespecting some powerful sages. And it all leads to this tragic, drunken brawl where the entire Yadava clan, full of arrogance, literally tears itself apart. They fulfill both prophecies, and that sets the stage for the sea to finally reclaim the city. For thousands of years, that's where the story ended. A powerful myth, a cautionary tale. But then, fast forward to the 20th century, and suddenly, whispers start coming from the deep. The very first modern clues that the legend of Dwarka might actually be anchored in reality. You know, at first it was just stories. Fishermen kept saying they saw weird, man-made stone structures under the water. Even pilots flying over the area reported seeing these strange, straight lines that looked like a city grid beneath the waves. Then, in 1963, the first official dig confirms, yep, people lived here a very long time ago. But the real game changer was in the 1970s, when they found a 6th century copper plate. It was the first physical piece of evidence that explicitly linked this specific location to Lord Krishna. All of a sudden, the myth had a real-world address. Now, these early clues were amazing, but it took one person's, well, unshakable belief to turn them into a full-blown search. And that brings us to the archaeologist Dr. S.R. Rao and what was, for a long time, a pretty lonely crusade. And this quote right here, this tells you everything you need to know about his mindset. For Dr. Rao, the Mahabharata wasn't just scripture, it was a historical text, a kind of ancient roadmap, packed with real clues that could lead to a physical discovery. He was convinced that the descriptions of Dwarka could be scientifically proven. But you have to understand, most people thought he was chasing a ghost. The academic world was very skeptical. Marine archaeology was basically a brand new field in India, which meant there was no advanced tech, no expert teams, and maybe worst of all, almost no funding. He was fighting a battle against disbelief and a serious lack of resources. And to really get a sense of his struggle, get this. Dr. Rao started his first huge underwater expeditions with a budget of just 800 rupees. That's it. It was cobbled together from tiny funds. People say he was so dedicated that he often paid for his team's food right out of his own salary. This was a mission fueled by pure passion, not money. And that passion, wow, did it pay off? Between 1983 and 1992, Dr. Rao's team ran 12 different expeditions. And what they started to find, well, it began to rewrite history. This is the moment where myth really starts to become science. Their first huge breakthrough. Deep underwater, the divers found a massive city wall, stretching for 560 meters. This was absolutely not a natural rock formation. Its construction perfectly matched the descriptions of Dwarka's fortifications, right there in the Mahabharata. And that was just the start. They found so much more. Huge stone pillars from collapsed buildings, advanced 3-holed stone anchors that proved this was a major port. They found seals, iron tools, pottery. The evidence was just overwhelming. They had found a complex, well-planned city that thrived on maritime trade. But then Then came the discovery that completely blew everyone away. They brought one of the artifacts up to be carbon dated. The results came back, and it was 9,000 years old. That's thousands of years before the Great Harappan civilization. This find absolutely stunned the entire scientific community. So, after a bit of a pause because of funding, the search kicked off again in 2001. But this time, they had modern technology on their side. They used advanced sonar to digitally map the seafloor, and it confirmed the enormous scale of the ruins, revealing structures that divers could have never seen on their own. The 21st century was proving what Dr. Rao had found decades earlier. Okay, so this is where it all comes together. We now have these two parallel stories running, the ancient scriptures on one side and modern science on the other. And this is where it gets really amazing, because when you put them side by side, they start to look like the same story, just told in two very different languages. I mean, just look at the correlations here. They're stunning. The myth says the city sank into the sea. Science shows a period of sudden, rapid sea level rise right around that time. The myth says Dwarka was built on lands claimed from the ocean. Geology confirms that, yep, this whole area used to be dry land. The myth describes a great port city, and the sonar mapping reveals exactly that. They don't contradict each other. They actually reinforce each other. The main scientific theory for what happened is a massive sea level rise event. The data shows that right around the time Dwarka is said to have disappeared, sea levels all over the world shot up suddenly and dramatically. So this wasn't just some local flood, it was a global event that ancient people would have absolutely seen as a divine, cataclysmic act. You know, this timeline really puts it all into perspective. This wasn't some overnight find. It's been a long, patient, 60-year journey of discovery. From those first little land-based digs back in the 60s, to Dr. Rao's heroic work in the 80s, the high-tech confirmations in the 2000s, all the way to the global spotlight of today. It took over half a century to bring this city back into the light. And that long journey reached a really powerful, symbolic moment in 2024, when India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi actually went down and performed a dive at the site. It was more than just a visit. It was this profound act that represented the final public reunification of India's ancient cultural heritage with modern, provable scientific discovery. Which really makes you think, maybe the story of Dwarka was never truly lost at all. It was just this timeless piece of human history, a spiritual touchstone, sleeping beneath the waves, just waiting for a time when we finally had the tools and the will to find it again. And that leaves us with one last big thought. If a city from myth, a city with golden palaces and a divine king, turned out to be a real, verifiable place, well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other truths, hidden deep inside our most ancient stories, are just out there, waiting to be rediscovered?